I need you all to understand cheap televisions and cheap consumer goods gave Americans the feeling of wealth. And because of endless domination overseas, specifically on the global south, unequal exchange of the global south, Americans, comparative to the living standards of the global south that were being dominated, were better off for sure. They were better off. Having said that, however, wealth is still relative domestically. You match it against those, you match those who have not against those who do have it, right? And in that process, I think wealth disparity grew tremendously in this country. And now we are in this predicament. And the only way out of this predicament, ironically enough, is to be China, is to do China, is to literally have industrial trade policy, nationalization of key sectors, boosting manufacturing, a federal jobs guarantee, a federal jobs program. That's how you're supposed to get out of this. With central planning. You're secretly excited about this all, don't lie. No, I think that, I mean, this is a situation where I think Americans will break away from, this is a situation where I think Americans will break away from Donald Trump, regardless of what these fucking freakish, cultish losers are saying, because you can't make someone, through the cult mentality, you can't make someone believe that they have more money in their pocket. If they feel it, they feel it. Okay? Oh, dude, China like remove term limits for their premier like what Xi Jinping did? Yeah, ironically enough, that question you're presenting is exactly what we are doing. We're doing the bad parts of Chinese governance and not the good parts of Chinese governance. America already had a surveillance state. It is accelerating. America, at the very least, cared about like a theoretical free speech. It's eroded. We're moving in the Chinese direction in all the worst ways, in all the wrong ways, and not moving in the Chinese direction in all the best ways, in the right ways. Even development, rapid urbanization, massive infrastructure projects, massive infrastructure expenditures. This is the problem. That is the issue. Because people ask, like, what's next? How do we get out of this? How do we get out of this rut? And the reality of the matter is you only get out of this rut with serious government investment. That's the only way to get out of this. You cannot rely on the capital owners that put you in this fucking place, put you in this problem to begin with. You cannot rely on the magnanimous nature of capital owners. You cannot bully them through tariffs to boost manufacturing domestically. That process will take far too long. You still have to have serious control over that transition. And Donald Trump seemingly is not interested in doing that at all. This is a problem. This is an issue. And I don't think people understand it. The reason why I bring up all this stuff is because I am not anti-tariff. I've never been anti-tariff. I've never been anti-trade protectionism. However, what Donald Trump is doing is not trade protectionism at all. And that is very important. That's important to understand. That's important to address, and we must address it, especially at a time when there's a lot of confusion because you got Sean Fain, who I love, who I admire, who I think is brilliant, revolutionary, and very critical of the Trump administration, coming out and saying some of these tariffs are good. And I want to cover that. I want to cover the Democracy Now! Piece that famous Marxist professor Richard Wolff talked and responded to the Sean Fain statements on. I don't think Sean Fain took an L necessarily. I'll describe to you where he's coming from, why he's saying the things that he's saying, because the UAW's official position is that tariffs aren't bad. Free trade is bad. And we'll get to that in a second. But
Auto repair shop in Glendale, Wisconsin. Will you have to raise prices for your customers?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
By how much?
I guess the minimum is going to be 25% on all parts.
He worries his business will suffer.
What we see is it kind of freezes.
Why are you not anti-tariffs? No. Make no mistake. I'm anti everything that Trump did yesterday. I am completely against it. And I will tell you why I'm against it. I'm saying I'm not against tariffs on principle. Like, I'm against free trade on principle, especially because as it stands currently, free trade is not actually free. It's not being done. It's not being conducted amongst equal parties. Free trade is conducted with the global South. It's called free trade. It's not so free. It fucking hurts the domestic manufacturers, and it hurts the domestic labor force. It only helps capital owners seek out higher profit margins, basically by offshoring to countries that we have dominated, that are going to have a cheap industrial base, an industrial labor force as opposed to ours. It is a mechanism of extracting wealth once again.
Money freezes the willingness for customers to spend because they don't really know the future.
And in North Carolina, a state already hit hard from Hurricane Helene, some business owners say they have no choice but to raise their prices.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we will have to raise prices.
The president is confident the tariffs will bring jobs and manufacturing to the United States. Some auto workers applauding the move, but acknowledging that could take time.
I don't think it's going to be that long, but we have to be patient and let it happen.
The administration sending a warning to other countries not to retaliate.
This is not a negotiation, it's a national emergency.
Markets around the world tumbled with our allies denouncing the move, some even vowing countermeasures. Democrats quick to point out the president's campaign promise to lower prices for American families, but the president betting big here that this will bring manufacturing jobs.
You know what's funny about all this? If I'm a European leader right now, I'm fucking pissed, because this entire global trade structure was directly designed by American businessmen and European businessmen as well, but specifically dominated by American businessmen. We built this complex web. We took advantage of this complex web for decades. And now Donald Trump's like, nah, I'm done. I want more in return from you. And the reasons why he's doing this are there's the suggestions that he's making, like what he claims he's doing this for, and what I know is the real reason why he's doing this. And I'll be very honest with you. It's clear. This is to try and decouple the West, specifically the United States of America, from China as the manufacturing hub of the planet. That's it. Okay? This is seen as a matter of national security. This is a national security concern from the perspective of the anti-China hawks in the American government. They understand that if China were to not be so restrained in the future one day and all of a sudden stop the flow of treats to the United States of America, especially as China has implemented initiatives to create secondary markets for themselves, specifically in Africa, developing Africa, and using that as a market to sell to. Like, these are all the Belt and Road Initiative. These are all important steps that the Chinese government has taken because of its grand design for global trade. It in that process of China decided, yeah, you know what, we're just not, you're fucking us over. Okay, no more goods for you. It would collapse the United States of America. It would just collapse it. It would collapse the entire West. And I think that Donald Trump and his advisors recognize that fear and are actively trying to work against it. They're actively trying to bring back manufacturing and claw back some of that capability by force. The problem is they have no vision. They have no conviction. They're squishy, and they're backed by capital. So how the fuck do you do that when you try to do that through the neoliberal private-public partnership that you only implement? You can't do it. You can't bring back manufacturing this way. The most you'll do is the CHIPS Act. Ironically enough, what Biden was doing was the extent of what you can do if your vision is stuck within the neoliberal framework. That's it. And without that, without even the CHIPS Act, for example, without actual investments into American manufacturing, there is no world where you can just simply rely on companies going, yeah, let's build our factories here in the United States of America. And this is a dangerous prospect for numerous reasons because it will backfire for a couple different reasons. The lack of vision, the lack of Chinese vision, Chinese style central planning vision within the American government will inevitably lead to massive failures. Why? Because without central planning in this process, you're simply relying on foreign investment coming back into the United States of America because they're too fearful of the tariffs or whatever, which is already on shaky ground to begin with. That's number one. Number two, when tariffs kick in, and let's say you do start building factories, you build the domestic manufacturing, you build your output. There is no guarantee that other countries will be purchasing. The trade deficit is what Donald Trump wants to fix. But there's no guarantee that the other countries are going to start purchasing these commodities from the United States of America once it's made in the United States of America. That's number one. Number two, you build the manufacturing, okay? You shut off trade internationally. You shut off trade from China that way because now you have an alternative. You have the domestic production, okay? Great, fantastic. You have the domestic production. No one is going to pay tariffs because no one is going to be purchasing foreign goods. So all of a sudden, the tariff faucet is closed. So it doesn't necessarily make sense on that front either. And more importantly, even in the short term, tariffs will, of course, lead to inflation. What is inflation? It is just a collection of commodities that you track. That's and the prices of said commodities increasing. That's what inflation is. Why? Why will this lead to inflation? Because all of a sudden, every good, what a tariff is, for those of you who don't know, is an entry fee that usually an American importer is paying. Okay? It is not paid by the other country. It's paid by the person who is bringing the good into the United States of America. It's an entry fee that you're paying the American government. So it's a tax that they're paying. But that tax carries over to you, the consumer. How does it carry over to you, the consumer? Because you pay the entrance, you pay the entrance fee for the good that you're shipping into the United States of America, and then that automatically increases the price of the thing that you're selling because they have to keep their profit margins the same. God forbid they eat away at their profits. They're never going to do that. So all of a sudden, the price of the good is higher. Okay, so this is the reason why tariffs, especially universal tariffs such as this one, when applied, turn into a regressive tax, a sales tax, a flat tax. What is a regressive tax? A regressive tax is a tax that harms the working poor a lot more than it harms the wealthy. Because what are you going to do? Not fucking purchase gas? What are you going to do? Not purchase commodities? Not purchase food? No, you can't do that. It's going to break your bank a lot more than it breaks the banks of a wealthy person, a lot more than it hurts the wallet of a wealthy person. It is a regressive tax. It's a sales tax. But because Americans hate the word tax, Donald Trump has been able to expertly apply a sales tax across the board without ever mentioning the word sales tax and how it will increase his taxes on the working poor. So we're all going to get raises, right? No, you're not going to get a raise. You're probably going to lose your job, as a matter of fact, because as purchasing power diminishes because of inflation, companies will no longer be able to continue growing and be able to hire people, and inevitably will fire people. Layoffs will happen, which will accelerate the lack of purchasing power in the country. It will cripple the economy, and you will go into a depression. A great one! A great depression! And this has happened in the American past, in the not-so-distant American past, as a matter of fact. So on the one hand, I wanted to make sure that you understand that I am not necessarily anti-tariff. I am not necessarily anti-trade protectionism. I think trade protectionism can be good, especially when there is a domestic, competitive industrial force that already exists in the country, so they can quickly accelerate production. For car manufacturers, for example, this very much exists. For the UAW, for the American car manufacturers, this is seen as beneficial. However, the issue here is, as it has happened in the past, when Donald Trump did tariffs before on other goods last time around, and as tariffs have been implemented in the past, domestic manufacturers will also increase prices. So unless, and this is the last part of the problem that I was explaining earlier, unless there is price caps for American domestic manufacturers coming from a competent administrative state that actually wants to boost domestic manufacturing without making the American consumers incur that cost, they have to do price controls. But they will never do that. And this is precisely why historically, whenever tariffs happen, American manufacturers also increase their prices, as they did during COVID, regardless of supply and demand. This can only be done because of the tremendous amount of corporate consolidation that took place. Greedflation would not exist if there was at least a regulatory apparatus that stopped companies from behaving in these ways where they're like, well, you have more purchasing power. I'm just going to increase my prices. And it seems like, you'll yell, but not at me. You'll yell at the fucking government. Great. Okay. My profit margins will go higher and higher year over year. It's fantastic. Do you understand the problem here? Do you understand why this will abso-freaking-lutely increase prices? Because not only does this immediately increase prices for all goods that you purchase that are being imported into this country and all the raw materials necessary for even domestically manufactured goods, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of that as well that will increase the prices of even domestically manufactured goods. But outside of that, domestic manufacturers will also increase their prices because now there's market demand for it. Now everyone else's prices are higher. Why should you make less profits? Because once you recognize that under capitalism, there is never, ever going to be a moment where those with the fiduciary responsibility of constantly improving their profit margins for their shareholders, people that are legally bound to constantly improve shareholder value, will always increase the profit margins to the best of their ability, always improve shareholder value to the best of their ability. Then you start recognizing that they will never have an incentive to reduce the profits. They will never actually keep prices stable unless they're forced to keep prices stable. And a country like the United States of America has never done that, with the exception of Nixon, I guess. And Trump is certainly not the guy, I think, that will do that. This is why prices are slated to explode. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has said the market is going to boom. And boom it has. And boom it has. Now let's watch Time doing how tariffs work from 2 months ago. Hopefully this will be a quick and short explainer for you.
U.S. manufacturers make cars for $100, and they are selling briskly here at home. But the Chinese enter the market. They set their prices at $75. U.S. cars don't sell as well. The government decides to help the U.S. car makers, and they slap an 100% tariff on Chinese car imports. The companies that do the importing pay the tariff to the government. They typically raise the price of their products to cover it. Now, cars from China cost $150.
Yeah.
Consumers flock back to U.S.-made cars,
And even if China goes, all right, we'll lower the prices of our cars even further to help out the importers, okay? Even if they say, we'll help out the prices, we'll help out on our end, the tariffs are usually so high that Chinese cars, once they do enter the American marketplace, because of the profit incentive from the importers, the middleman in that situation, they will still not be able to compete with American manufacturers. However, the way that this works is once the Chinese cars on the marketplace are $150, these cars don't stay at $100. They go up to $125. Sometimes they also go up to $150. Do you understand? Because the same incentive structure, the same profit motive exists for the domestic manufacturers as well. So they take advantage of the market and they also increase their prices.
all is good again. China may even open plants to build cars in the U.S., adding U.S. jobs to avoid the tax. But China likely retaliates and slaps tariffs on U.S. goods, making them more expensive overseas and hurting U.S. exports in different industries. Increased demand for U.S. cars and a lack of competition from other manufacturers may motivate U.S. car makers to raise their prices too. the market becomes less efficient and innovative.
Yeah, this last part is just, to a certain degree, this last part is obviously, it's pro-capitalist. And capitalists love free trade, and capitalists, of course, hate any kind of trade protectionism. There are obviously short-term negative pressures on the market, for sure, when any kind of trade protectionist policy is implemented. Okay? This is correct. Price increases is what I'm talking about, for sure. Having said that, if America and the American government did have a genuine interest in boosting American manufacturing, then they would have to, one, build the industrial base before they made these initiatives and plan for long-term prosperity in the same exact way that the Chinese government has done for the past couple of decades, and is the reason why the Chinese government has been able to outcompete every other country and their own domestic manufacturers. You can't compete with BYD because BYD is getting funded by the government. That's it. As long as Chinese government subsidies exist, they can behave in a way like Amazon does, with predatory pricing to outcompete everybody else. Because state subsidies with no real interest in improving profit margins, because every company is still ultimately controlled by the state, can be wielded like a weapon to eviscerate the American and European markets.